Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever felt that fundamental pull?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the sense of being this unique individual with your own thoughts and feelings, almost like a self-contained universe.
Yeah, totally. Your own little world inside.
Exactly. And yet, at the same time, there's this nagging feeling, isn't there? That you're part of something much, much bigger, interconnected with everything around you.
That tension is real. Duality versus non-duality. It feels like you have to pick a side sometimes.
Right. And it often feels like our thinking pushes us to choose one over the other. Are we separate? Are we one?
Which is the real reality.
And that's exactly where the Abstractionists' papers comes in with a really intriguing perspective.
It offers a different way to look at it.
Yeah, it doesn't demand we just ditch the feeling of being an individual to embrace unity. Instead, it presents this framework
Like a framework, yeah.
for understanding how both our sense of separation and the underlying interconnectedness can coexist.
Not as conflicting ideas, which is key.
Right. Not conflicting, but as different aspects of how reality actually functions. So our mission today is really to explore this framework and see how the book tries to bridge that apparent divide.
And the core idea, tying into the book's main argument, is that this coexistence makes sense when you see reality through these orthogonal domains.
Orthogonal domains.
We'll be focusing on two main ones today, the interpretive domain and the causation domain.
Think of these as different kinds of realities, maybe, operating on different principles as the book lays it out.
Exactly, different axes almost.
And look, if this is already sparking your curiosity, if you want to get deeper into how this all works, you can explore the Abstractionist papers yourself. It's all freely available online.
Yep, at www.welcometothe.bluespace.com.
So consider this our kind of guided tour, our shortcut to get you thinking about these pretty profound ideas. Where should we start? The domains.
Let's start with the interpretive domain. The book often calls it red space. What really defines this realm, according to the text?
For me, it's that intensely personal world. Everything that makes up my experience, my thoughts as they stream by, memories popping up, the images in my head, sounds, feelings, the whole internal show.
And it feels incredibly real, right? Complete.
Totally complete. Like, this is reality for me. But the book makes a crucial point right away, doesn't it?
It does. That this entire experienced reality, the world as it appears uniquely to you, is actively constructed.
By your own mind. It's not just passively received.
Right. That feeling of complete self-contained inner world is central. The book kind of nods to metaphors like Plato's cave or the Matrix.
Yeah, the idea that what we see isn't the full picture.
Exactly. Those ideas about perception's limits. But the Abstractionist papers draws a really important distinction here.
What's the distinction?
It's not suggesting these are like shared illusions or some grand deception being pulled on everyone.
Okay.
It's more that each of us is constantly building our own individual internal red space. It's a personal construction project.
My reality tunnel? Your reality tunnel?
Precisely. And the book emphasizes that meaning itself is created within this interpretive domain.
So even just recognizing, oh, that event happened, that's already an interpretation.
Absolutely. It's shaped by your internal models, your history, everything that makes you you. It's never just raw data.
Okay, so that's our individual internal world red space, where separation, identity, the feeling of I really seems to live.
That's the idea.
Now let's switch gears. What about the other domain, the causation domain, or blue space? What's its nature?
So the causation domain is presented as the shared stage, the arena where processes interact.
Processes, like physical things.
Physical things, energy patterns, anything that can influence something else. And they interact according to specific rules, right? Cause and effect.
Well.
And crucially, this interaction happens independently of anyone's interpretation. It doesn't need to be observed or understood to occur.
So back to the billiard balls example. If one hits another in the blue space, it moves. Whether I'm thinking about physics or pizza in my red space doesn't change that physical interaction.
Exactly that. The causal chain just unfolds. And this is where that concept of orthogonality really clicks in.
Right, you mentioned that. Orthogonal.
Causation and interpretation, blue space and red space. They aren't just different viewpoints on the same reality. The book argues they are fundamentally different kinds of reality.
Operating on different axes, like you said, almost at right angles.
That's a really good way to visualize it, yeah. They don't overlap in their fundamental nature, but they are deeply linked. One, the blue space, operates through interaction in this shared domain.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. The other, red space, gives rise to personal meaning, subjective experience, the feeling of being a separate self.
And a critical point the book stresses, There's no direct mind-to-mind link, right? No direct access from my red space to your red space.
None whatsoever. All influence, all connection, any communication has to happen through the shared causation domain. The blue space is the only bridge.
Okay, that's a big claim. So how do these two domains, fundamentally different but linked actually, well, interact? How does stuff from the blue space affect my red space? And how do my thoughts affect the blue space?
Good question. The book outlines three main ways this connection happens. First is causation to interpretation.
C to I.
C to I. Think of a signal in the blue space like light waves hitting your retina. That's a causal event.
Physical photons.
Physical photons. That event then induces or triggers an internal response in your red space. Those light waves get interpreted as the sensation of color or brightness.
Ah, okay. So a physical cause leads to a subjective interpreted experience. Makes sense. What about the other direction?
That's interpretation to causation, I to C.
My thoughts making things happen.
Essentially, yes. Your thoughts, decisions, intentions conceived in your red space manifest as actions out there in the blue space.
Like deciding to pick up this cup.
Exactly. The thought, the intention pickup cup happens in red space. That leads to nerve signals, muscle movements, physical actions in the blue space. Your internal state influences the shared causal world through your body's behavior.
Got it. My internal world makes waves in the external one. So C to I to C. What's the third interaction?
The third is interpretation to interpretation, which is basically how communication works according to this model.
I to I. How does that happen if we don't have direct red space access?
Well, think about it. You have a meaning, an idea, in your red space you want to share.
Okay.
You have to encode that meaning into a signal in the blue space. That could be spoken words, sound waves.
Or typing an email patterns of light on a screen.
Precisely. That signal, that pattern, travels through the blue space. It reaches another person. Their sensory system picks it up. That's causation.
These again?
Right. That causal input then triggers a response in their red space. Their mind decodes the signal and constructs its own interpretation, its own meaning.
Ah, so the meaning isn't in the sound waves or the pixels.
Not inherently, no. The meaning is recreated, reconstructed individually by the receiver based on the signal. It's an induced response, not a direct transfer.
So right now, in this conversation, the sound waves I make are blue space stuff. They hit your ears, cause a response, and you interpret in your red space, and vice versa.
Exactly. We're not, telepathically linking our red spaces. We're influencing each other via the blue space intermediary.
Wow. Okay. That really brings us back to that initial tension, doesn't it? That feeling of being so separate, locked in our own heads.
Very strong feeling.
Versus that sense that maybe somehow we're all connected. It feels like such a contradiction.
It does. Are we isolated individuals in our red spaces, or are we all just part of one seamless whole in the blue space? Which is it.
Yeah, pick one.
And the Abstractionist papers essentially says, well, it's both. They're both true, just in different ways.
How does that work?
Unity exists in the continuous interaction within the causation domain, the blue space. We are constantly affecting each other, part of this unbroken web of cause and effect. That's the non-dual aspect, if you like.
The underlying connectedness.
Yes, and separation. That's the reality of our distinct individual interpretative domains, our red spaces, the unique way each of us constructs meaning and identity. That's the duality aspect.
So they're not contradictions fighting it out.
Not according to this framework.
Yeah.
They are coexisting realities operating on those different orthogonal axes. One describes the shared interactive reality. The other describes the private experiential reality. Both are fundamental.
Okay, that is an elegant way to dissolve the paradox. You don't have to choose. You just have to recognize the different domains they belong to. Now, you mentioned light earlier as being pivotal, more than just seeing.
Oh, absolutely. The book uses light in a very fundamental sense. It's presented as the boundary, really, and the primary mechanism governing all interaction between the causation and interpretive domains.
All interaction, not just vision.
Not just visible light, no. Think of it more broadly as the carrier of causal patterns. Any variation, any signal, any pattern in the blue space that can be engaged with and responded to by a process.
Yeah.
That's light in this context.
Oh, sound waves could be a form of this light, pressure waves, chemical signal.
Exactly. It's the intermediary pattern that crosses from the causal realm and potentially triggers an interpretive response.
And critically, light itself doesn't carry the meaning, right? You said that before.
That's a cornerstone insight here. Light, these causal patterns, presents variation. It presents difference and change propagating through the blue space.
Oh, yeah.
When that pattern reaches a process, whether it's a complex human brain or a simple bacterium reacting to a chemical gradient, that process constructs meaning.
Based on its own internal setup.
Based on its own internal structure, its history, its model, within its own red space, even if that red space is very simple for a bacterium. The signal triggers a response, but the interpretation, what it means, comes entirely from within the receiver.
Wow, okay. This feels pretty revolutionary when you spell it out like that. It really shakes up some basic assumptions about reality, doesn't it?
It really does. We tend to operate, often unconsciously,
Yeah.
assuming we have direct access to what's out there.
Yeah, like my eyes are just windows showing me exactly what is.
Right. That our experience is a faithful, passive copy of reality. But the Abstractionist papers flips that script. It emphasizes the active, constructive role of the mind or any interpretative process.
So what we experience isn't what happens in the blue space,
Not directly, no.
but rather it's how our red space responds to what happens in the blue space.
Precisely. It's an interpretation, a constructed response triggered by causal interactions.
So let's connect that back. My strong feeling of being a separate self, this unique me, that's a function of my interpretative domain, my red space construction project.
That's how the framework presents it, yes.
Yeah.
It's a necessary feature, perhaps, of having an individual perspective, an individual point of interpretation.
And the underlying unity, the interconnectedness we sometimes feel or intuit.
That reflects the reality of the causation domain, the blue space, that continuous, unbroken flow of interaction where everything influences everything else.
So they're two sides of the same coin, really, just different fundamental aspects of reality existing within these orthogonal domains.
So that's the core argument. Duality in the red space, non-duality in the blue space, coexisting without contradiction.
Okay, let's try and bring this full circle then. The big takeaway seems to be that the Abstractionists' papers offers this framework, this way of seeing, where the apparent fight between duality and non-duality just kind of dissolves.
Exactly. They aren't opposing forces vying for the title of true reality.
They're just different facets, different dimensions existing in these orthogonal domains of interpretation and causation.
So rather than asking, is my inner world real or is the outer world real? The book suggests, well, they're both real. They just operate by different rules and different spaces, so to speak.
It really makes you think differently about those moments, you know? When you feel that tension, your own specific viewpoint versus a sense of being part of something bigger.
How does seeing it through this red space, blue space lens shift your understanding of those very personal experiences? It's a good question to ponder.
Absolutely. And look, this deep dive, we've really only scratched the surface of the ideas in the Abstractionists' papers. There's so much more detail and nuance in the book itself.
Oh, definitely. We've hit the highlights of this particular aspect, but the implications spread out quite widely.
So we absolutely encourage you, if this resonates, go check it out. Remember, the whole thing is freely available. www.welcometothe.bluespace.com.
Dive in, explore it yourself, see how these concepts unfold in more detail.
It really does challenge some fundamental ways we think about ourselves and reality.
And maybe we can leave you with this thought to chew on. If our experience of being separate, of being me, is a construction happening within the interpretive domain,
Our red space.
and if the causation domain, the blue space, reveals this continuous, unbroken flow of interaction, this underlying unity,
Yeah.
what new possibilities for understanding ourselves, the universe, consciousness itself, what opens up when we really start to recognize both of these domains, both separation and unity, as equally real, equally fundamental facets of what is.